This is a really big game changer. There are a lot of voices out there on Twitter or X saying, it's just an executive order. They're not going to buy. It's just moving seized funds and not selling. But I think they're missing the bigger picture that it is a seismic shift in the perception of Bitcoin. And I think Adam Back said it the best that it is a major shift of the Overton window. If not, it's like a destruction of the Overton window that, Bitcoin is legitimate now, not just as an investment asset, but as a reserve asset and something that government should have because it is of the utmost strategic importance. The ETFs, I would say, shifted that already and made it a legit asset class. You can't have BlackRock coming into the picture, the largest asset manager on the planet, launching a Bitcoin ETF that is their most successful ETF to date and one of their biggest now, and not understand that that has changed something. But this has changed everything because we haven't yet seen that nation state race to accumulate Bitcoin, right? You've had a few small countries buying, El Salvador buying, and Bhutan mining, but that hasn't really triggered a race because they're just not big enough, right? Everyone looks to the US for guidance on everything and where things are going. And that was the same case for the ETFs that like the Hong Kong and Australian ones didn't launch until the SEC cleared it in the US and then they went. It's the same thing for this. Like you have to have the signal from a major world power that Bitcoin is important to them before everything else trickles downstream and people really start to follow significantly. But I think this EO is that step. And then now we have Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin bill that will actively implement buying in addition to the reserves they have that are held. But the rate at which things are developing is just so much faster. Like you had, a few U.S. senators posting pictures of themselves with laser eyes yesterday, and one of the dogs has laser eyes too. Like I didn't see that coming, but maybe we're gonna start seeing even more. But I'm here for it.
Did you ever imagine that the US would be one of the first countries with a strategic Bitcoin reserve, the global reserve currency holder of the world?
I think it was a necessity, and the U.S. is seemingly on a track to recovery from financial mismanagement, let's say. I don't see the same happening in Europe and other places. They're all sort of in denial, but at least the Trump admin has sort of recognized the problem. That's why they're trying to stop the death spiral. That's why they've implemented the Department of Government Efficiency. This is why they're trying to lower the 10-year rates. They realize that the debt is unsustainable. Inflation is a symptom, and something has to be done. And they're trying these other things, but Bitcoin is the only solution that will fix these things. So, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it's a bit surprising the US was the next big one. I thought we'd have another big country, and that's kind of what we've been trying to accomplish at Jan 3. But what we've encountered is just everyone wants to wait for the US. And there's just a lot of fear of career risk. And with this shift in the US landscape, I think there is no more career risk. And that alleviation of the fear about doing something with Bitcoin, it just hasn't made its way around the world yet. Many Bitcoiners were expecting, like, we're gonna get an Omega candle right now with the EO, but I think you need some massive change before that is going to happen, like retail coming in or normal people understanding Bitcoin and or even just the action of buying either from the US or other countries. And that hasn't happened yet. The EO is just sort of news and it's not well understood. And the impact is not well understood.
Europe's monetary sovereignty and monetary independence
Yeah.
feels threatened by America adopting crypto. Do you have any thoughts about Europe and why you think we might not see similar adoption there?
Europe is kind of its own little microcosm of understanding reality and common sense. And there's got to be like some major change there. But if you go back like a number of years, I mean, they're shutting down nuclear reactors. They're doing all these very poorly thought out things that sound good in the interim and sound like you're doing the world a service, but the reality is you're not. And it's the same for monetary policy and economics too. They've kind of dug themselves into this hole. And this is why I think they're accelerating their CBDC so they can fully control monetary policy, negative interest rates and all that good stuff, expiring bills and everything to stimulate spending. They're going to really try hard at that. So, yes, the adoption of Bitcoin in the US is a direct threat. And it's not even about Bitcoin at this point. Like the US is also looking to push stablecoins in a big way. And it looks like, Tether is going to be a part of that. So, what does that mean for Europe? I think they should be far more concerned about stablecoins because the barrier to understand a stablecoin is far lower than Bitcoin. So imagine you can go to any merchant with your self-custodial wallet, pay the merchant in a stablecoin, and that's fully outside of their control. Like they can't really police that. Maybe they'll try. They'll go more draconian, more authoritarian, but it won't work. And the CBDC won't work either. So yeah, I'm just not sure what's happening in Europe now, but it doesn't look good for sure.
Tell us more about why you built Aqua Wallet and what is the vision there?
The vision behind Aqua is that we can get Bitcoin into the hands of everyone in the world. I think the only way to accomplish that is with a self-sovereign, self-custodial wallet that people control it fully, like end to end. Any custodial offering, you're subject to all the regulations in all these different places, and it's just almost impossible to grow very rapidly because you need to, create an entity everywhere you go and comply with the regulations to hold money for other people. So Aqua is really the only way forward. And the way we're trying to build it is that it gives you that same custodial feeling like you're using a Venmo or something. It just works. We just use third-party providers to do all the swaps and conversions that ideally don't require a lot of friction, like onboarding or anything like that. You just use it. And so far, I think we've been able to reach a pretty good level, and we're just looking for more partners to work with that can help us deliver that vision. But the idea is that we can tap into the market that Tether has opened up, the 400 million stablecoin users, and get them into Aqua and Bitcoin. There are 400 million users that we can get into Bitcoin that already know how to use the QR code and transact, and they know what an address is. So we just have to do it better and use Liquid and everything else that is in the Bitcoin ecosystem, not as an altcoin chain. But there's a shortage of dollars there. Like if you want physical dollars, there's not enough. Even the banks have a shortage of dollars too. So like Tether really solves a problem in that they can give the unbanked access to dollar value. And that is a big game changer that most Bitcoiners haven't fully realized yet because they're so focused on pushing Bitcoin adoption. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but your average guy in Argentina, he definitely knows what the dollar is and he wants a digital version of it. He doesn't care where it is. He just needs that because it's a necessity. And we should give it to them and we should get them into Bitcoin. So the US is adopting it also out of necessity to fix their economic problems. And El Salvador did the same, but to boost their country and kind of get attention. So I think there's very different things at play in each one, but definitely you can say like the US is going to make a bigger difference because it's such a bigger country that will have a far bigger impact on the Bitcoin adoption around the world because El Salvador is small. And when we go out to engage with other countries, we always talk about El Salvador as like the first one and they're doing this and they're on a Bitcoin standard. But it doesn't seem to matter that much. Everyone is still looking to the US and what's happening there. It's just, you always want to look at the bigger guy and see what they're doing.
Earlier on in the conversation, you did mention the Omega candle. Samson, I would love your thoughts on the Omega candle, what this is going to look like, and why people are not prepared for exponential change.
Yeah, so the Omega candle is a 100K candle, and a God candle, or also called a Godzilla candle, is a 10K candle. But the Omega candle, it should be green, but it might be red. Like the one of the first God candles, I think, was a red God candle, like 10K down. But it just goes to show that the Bitcoin price movements are becoming bigger and bigger, and people are not always aware of these movements. But I still see people like poking at me and saying, "Hey, where's your God candle that you've been talking about?" And my reaction is like, "Go look at the chart. There have been like 8 or 9 of them so far." But people aren't really aware, and they're not going to be aware of the Omega candle too. Maybe they will, who knows? But like the indication is that if we're seeing God candles regularly, 10K daily movements, it's probably going to bring us to a 100K daily movement relatively soon. And 100K is just, 10x. Bitcoin has done 17x in the past with a totally different macroeconomic landscape than today. Like zero Bitcoin national adoption, no strategic Bitcoin reserves, no talk about issuing Bitcoin bonds, and no talk about buying 1 million Bitcoin from the US. So it's completely within the realm of possibility that you get a 100K candle soon, maybe this year. So I think that the biggest thing is the Omega candle is saying be ready for this when it happens because things are changing very, very rapidly.